Hello ladies and gentlemen, my name is Megajon, and today we're going to be continuing our journey through the Stealth Training Arenas program. In this video, we're going to cover Stealth Mission 4, its alternative version, and any Easter eggs and references associated with it. This video will spoil the challenges in said mission, so don't watch this if you plan on playing the game for yourself. So without further ado, let's get into it. Excluding the alternative missions, players are likely to play the primary stealth missions in order first, and in doing so, will encounter the patroller enemy for the first time. As a way to innovate on what's come before with what limited knowledge I had at the time of making this mission, I found a way to make the enemy move in a circular pattern. And as a way to add diversity to the locales featured in these arenas, we have ourselves a snow level. Admittedly a smaller level than what came before in terms of sheer size, it isn't as linear as the previous missions. Here we're tasked with making contact with hostages in this captured outpost and getting info from them to call for help. M3G4 provides additional info and tips regarding the mission, but I'll be omitting them since I'm here to explain everything anyway. We also have a new toy to play with that coincides with the level's gimmick, a remote-controlled car drone we can drive around. The enemy won't detect the car, but if you drive into a patroller, you might make the physics act all weird and fling your car to who knows where. But as you can see, we're essentially limited to the exterior of the base. You'll see M3G4 blocking this tunnel and he'll remind you of your objectives. He'll explain why he can't do the job himself if you attempt to be all smart with him and order you to resume with the mission. While we're here though, you can see the back end of this building and actually make visual confirmation of the hostage's location. But near where you spawn, you'll see a small opening in the wall blocked off by a box. A gutter for people operating out of this place to push the snow out. Surely there can't be only one, right? Taking your car around the opposite end of the base leads you to an open part for you to drive through. Almost immediately, you can see a note with a 5-digit code on it. A code that opens the door into the base's yard. Of course, you can skip this part if you already know the code to get in. Once you're in, the hostages aren't too far away. Watch for the patroller's movement. There's actually more than one kind of patroller. They typically turn counterclockwise, occasionally clockwise. Some make bigger turns while others make smaller ones. But that aside, avoiding this patroller is hardly any trouble. After passing him, there's two ways to get inside the building. The quickest but trickiest way is to go between the vision cones of these two sentinels and simply walk inside. I say trickiest because getting through remains predicated on your ability to roughly judge the extent of the enemy's eyesight, if you recall from the previous video guide. The second way is to simply walk around the guard at the door while avoiding the others that may cross paths with you on the way there. It's safer if you walk through it carefully and patiently. Once inside, you might notice one of the noob soldiers dead on the floor. Another case of playing detective thanks to environmental storytelling. Simply put, this man was shot through the window and killed when these bandits invaded. Really not that much to it. Anyway, these hostages rounded up inside are more than compliant when you meet them. They provide you with a means of entering the comms tower when you inform them of your plan. Funnily enough, you can actually head straight for the tower upon starting the mission if you know the code for it, making this one of the shorter missions to complete. But assuming you're still in the base, retracing your steps and escaping through the primary code door is pretty straightforward. Your path may vary with all these patrollers moving around constantly, however. Walking along the perimeter of the outpost, you'll see this guide guarding the entrance, but when the path is clear, you can proceed. The gap between this last sentinel and the wall is big enough to where you won't even need to sidestep. Just something to punish you if you don't check your corners before moving up. But once you get into this room, the mission is complete. Straight away, you'll notice M3G4 isn't here to greet us when we start Stealth Mission 4. As he informs us through this radio, you got lost in all this bad weather and need to reconvene at a tunnel within close proximity to your current position. The noob soldiers are out in full force here. You'll encounter snipers and scouts this time around. Despite how hazy things look out here, they're still relatively easy to spot thanks to how bright their body colors are. So it really helps to take your time to spot the enemy before plotting your movement. Moving on, this patroller's the first thing you'll see in this forked path. But going through this way is essentially a dead end since the enemy presence makes crossing through here impossible. So there's only one way through this part. Watch out for the scout that walks up and down this part of the arena. Once you go around to the other side of the tower building, watch out for the second scout that walks around these supplies. Then we make our way through the primary entrance. If you recall in the last video, I urged you to experiment with your surroundings to see what you can do. But not every experiment leads to success. So if I don't mention any other way through, assume it's impossible. If I do mention a possible way through, I'll state the level of risk in taking it as I always do. But with that out of the way, watch where you walk when you get past that scout. You'll see a third one walking up and down this way. He's hardly a concern if you simply wait for him to get out of the way. It's the snipers on those ledges you'll have to worry about. They see 4 times as far as sentinels do, but their vision is significantly more narrow. Getting inside the comms tower isn't necessary to progress. However, successfully getting inside and clicking on this box gives you the RC car again. Since enemy movement is trickier in this level, scouting ahead may actually serve you well. But even without the car, completing this mission is still certainly possible. Once you're in the clear, go through the gate and enter the yard. Trying to circumvent the level by walking along the walls of the yard, or hopping onto the roof of this building will only get you so far, so let's try another way. Keep an eye on these patrollers and scouts. Time your movement in accordance to their position, and escape through either of these 2 ways. Hopping the fence over here is one of those ways. Just don't jump blindly in front of this guy here. Move past this final scout here, and it's smooth sailing all the way to the end. If you go through the doorway here, you'd have less to worry about in terms of enemy combatants. Choose whichever way you find preferable. Either way, you'll be reunited with M3G4 at the end. Though this arena is smaller than normal and both of its missions are relatively short, there's probably more Easter eggs in here than even the last mission. Just saying it now, there aren't going to be any comparison shots for the remaining missions since they weren't remade. I added some touch-ups throughout the years as new technology came out for Roblox to make the presentation look that much nicer. Aesthetics aside, trying to exit through the tunnel in the main mission is a callback to Stealth Mission 2 where you could do something similar. Also, in Stealth Mission 4 and its free roam variation, there is something rather peculiar you can find buried in the ground tucked away in this small corner of the map. This massive robot stuck in the snow is a reference to the 2007 film, Transformers, where the movie's central antagonist is trapped under similar circumstances. In case you couldn't tell by my name, I'm a huge fan of the franchise. The Transformer you see before you is actually derived from a truck my friend Cyblox made. He's responsible for the creation of all the vehicles you see in STAP. Logically, a Transformer should be composed of all the parts you find in the vehicle it turns into. So I took the truck he made and rearranged the parts into this original creation as a fun side project. I call him Alkali, named after my favorite song. The truck he turns into is actually the same kind of truck you see in Mission 1, albeit in its original blue color. He's absent in Alt Mission 4, which means Alkali didn't crash into the snow yet and the rocks that surround him don't show up yet either. In other words, Alt Mission 4 takes place before Stealth Mission 4. You also may be wondering why the noobs are allies in Stealth Mission 4 but are enemies in Alt Mission 4. Believe it or not, there's chronology to these stealth and alternative missions. Certain things add up when you connect the dots that way. When all these guides are over and done with, I'll explain in which order these missions occur in accordance to each other. Moving on, you may recall from the previous video that 64 is my lucky number. The reference is more obvious with the first code you come across in Stealth Mission 4, with the code being 64 and 64 times 2 put together. The second code is another reference to it as well, 81632. It's just 8 times 2 and that times 2 before it hits 64. 8, 16, 32, 64, and 128 are all multiples of 8 after all. I take a liking to adding number ciphers like that to the things I make. But who cares, right? Some of you may have noticed some of these colorful blocks scattered throughout the levels. This is a reference to the power-ups you can collect in Super Mario 64. In Alt Mission 4, you can see all of them from just this one spot in front of the door. Everywhere else, they're a little more scattered. These cars strung about Stealth in Alt Mission 4 were all made by Cyblox, once again, and modified to fit the aesthetics of this mission. Alt Mission 4's layout is also a bit different this time around. The small space between the wall and the house's windows is absent in its alternative version. This version of Mission 4's map is actually based off of the cut PvP version of the mission. Don't worry, I'm going to talk about the cut content in general at a later point. Inside the comms building, you can see ration stores for the enemy soldiers. Apparently these guys love eating cardboard. Also inside the building, you can see a black and red design underneath a chair. Not much significance to it aside from being my favorite colors and looking cool. Next, the path players will generally take to complete Alt Mission 4 is vaguely in the shape of a letter M. I also want to talk about the RC car. This little device is actually based on a fairly old Roblox gear that was retextured for STAP. I had like no resources at the time for making textures. Just the picture tools that Microsoft Word of all things provided. It just goes to show you that if you really set your heart on something, you can accomplish just about anything, even if your methods are unorthodox. Last thing I want to cover is a secret at the Alternative Missions hub area. Click on the vehicle to honk the horn. But that's pretty much everything I wanted to cover today. Thanks for watching. Be sure to leave a like and subscribe if you're enjoying the content that I make. Use the link in the description below if you want to play the game for yourself. Till next time. All hail the end.